No company is perfect. Despite all of the success Disney's had as a company and all of the accolades it's achieved, there are still those projects and movies that they'd rather us sort of forget about. And some flops that turned out to be surprise successes. Hi guys, I'm RetroNemo, and on today's episode of Tales from Animation History, we're talking about some of Disney's biggest failures. Whether it being as a company or specific movies, we're just gonna look at flops that Disney's had in his career. Before I get started with the video, I just wanna say big Roundtable shout out to Jim Grisel. This incredible man worked on me with this video. He did a ton of research for it. He was incredible to work with. He's on the Pizza Party podcast. He has a personal YouTube channel. All around great guy, amazing YouTuber. Go check him out. You probably already know him. But yeah, just credit where credit's due. Thank you so much, Jim. Alright, without further ado, let's get started with this list. Sleeping Beauty. Well, if you look at the Disney classics, what do you got? Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, and Sleeping Beauty is definitely grouped in with that. So it's kind of surprising here that this beloved Disney princess was actually a failure. Sure, the film was an incredible technical achievement and also incredible in terms of its storytelling. Sleeping Beauty was incredibly expensive, costing about $6 million, which at the time it was made, that was a lot of money. The film only made about $5.3 million of its money back. The financial loss of Sleeping Beauty was so bad that Disney did not make another fairy tale movie until The Little Mermaid in 1989, and that is true. And this being Disney's first massive loss in almost a decade, there was major layoffs after it happened. This quote from Martin Rabinovich, Disney's head of marketing at the time, sums it up perfectly, saying it was an incredibly wrong film for the time. Its values and philosophy, true love, waiting for one's lover, lifelong commitments, were at their lowest ebb in our society 10 years ago. The idealism of 10 years ago had nothing to do with monogamy. Our market research shows that there is now a renaissance of those ideas. So basically he's saying when it came out, no one believed in true love or a kiss would save a princess. Culturally, it wasn't relevant. But over time, people began to love this movie, and it has definitely made its budget back by now.
But don't you remember? We've met before.
We have?
Well, of course. You said so yourself. Once upon a dream.
The Watcher in the Woods. Disney making a live-action horror movie may sound like the best worst idea ever, but did you know that in the 1980s, they actually tried and failed? The movie was called The Watcher in the Woods, and it was targeting the young adult audience that they were trying so desperately to grab at the turn of that decade. The 80s were a hip new time for kids, and horror movies were better than ever, except for this one. Producer Tom Leach pitched the project to Disney, saying that it was going to be their Exorcist. That's how much faith they had in the movie, but it turns out that faith just wasn't enough. The Watcher in the Woods had a limited release, but the reception was so bad that they pulled it out of theaters after only a week. The biggest gripe was with the movie's ending. So they did what any smart company would do and quickly and expensively reshoot the ending without the director off location. The original release in 1980 was 108 minutes long, but the re-release in 1981 was cut back to just 83 minutes. They even released a newer version post-reshoots in 1981, meaning that this movie actually had 3 separate endings. The second reshot ending was so confusing that the movie was highly regarded as just not having an ending. It just shows that if something has a problem, you can't just quickly fix it. Sometimes it's just not meant to be. And for a Watcher in the Woods, it definitely wasn't meant to be.
Where was she?
I'm not sure. A place where people are changed into negative images.
How did she get there?
An accidental exchange between the Watcher and her. And he needed my image to set her free.
Fantasia 1940. Whoa, RetroNemo, slow your roll! Fantasia was not a failure, Fantasia's a masterpiece.
I love Fantasia.
Well, you are right, Fantasia is an incredible masterpiece, but you have to understand that when Fantasia originally came out, it was a financial failure. And that was again because of the massive budget, but there were other factors involved. Walt Disney dreamed of installing a system called Fantasound sound players in every theater, so that you could fully experience Fantasia. Well, the theaters had to lease and install Fantasound to play it, which was expensive for them. On top of the fact that Fantasound sometimes took up to a week to install. Add on the fact that World War II completely cut off the European movie market, which makes up for 45% of a movie's total income, and the fact that the movie was 2 hours and 10 minutes, it doesn't seem that crazy that this film did not do spectacular. Walt Disney even admitted so in an Oscar speech. That's just sad. But again, like a Sleeping Beauty, this one eventually found its footing later and is now seen as a classic.
My congratulations, sir.
Congratulations to you, Mickey.
Gee, thanks. Well, so long. I'll be seeing you.
Goodbye.
This is sort of a mini one because I don't want to drag on the same subject a lot, but Pinocchio was a similar movie like this. Its budget was twice the cost of Snow White, and it made barely any of it back. Adding on to the fact that it was still World War II when the European markets were cut off, the film flopped. But over time, it found its footing again, and it was released on home video to incredible praise. It's now seen as Disney's best movie.
What's he think I look like? A jackass?
You sure do.
Alright, let's skip ahead to some more recent failures. John Carter. Now, if you're like me, you didn't really pay much attention to John Carter. Like, I saw the trailers for it, and I'm like, that looks kinda dumb, and I didn't really see it, and that was about it. But you may not have known how big of a financial failure John Carter really was. In theory, this thing should have been amazing. A space epic based on an old beloved property, spearheaded by Andrew Stanton, who was the director of Finding Nemo and WALL-E, a Pixar legend. But when the movie came out, it proved to be a complete failure. John Carter cost $250 million and only made $73 million back. That is a $177 million loss. Massive for a company like Disney. There's not really too many specific reasons why John Carter failed. They did screw up the advertising because in an action movie, they film the action scenes first so that they can cut them up for the trailer in time. But Stanton refused to, filming an action movie what would typically be seen as out of order, severely hurting the trailers and the marketing for the movie. It was also his first live action film, which going from like a Pixar movie to a giant blockbuster is a big jump. It also just seems like a mediocre space epic about a guy who can jump, so who knows, maybe John Carter will have his time in history one day. Prom. How many of you actually remember seeing the trailer for Prom on Disney Channel? It just looked like a sort of average teen movie. I wasn't that interested in it, but maybe you were. Sadly though, it was a failure. But to understand why, you have to look at the business of Disney at the time. Rich Ross, who was just made Disney Studio Chairman, the man responsible for Nick at Night, the Kids' Choice Awards, and a lot of Disney TV stuff. This turned out to be a mistake because this guy was a horrible chairman and was responsible for both John Carter and Marcis Moms, two big financial failures for the company. But Prom was something that he developed and greenlit because he wanted to recreate those Disney Channel hits that he had, those sitcom hits. He took a page from High School Musical's notebook by giving it like a bland name like Prom. In a way, this was sort of his passion project, his signature on his time as chairman, but it really only ended up making $10.1 million, the lowest grossing studio film of that year so far. Luckily, the film only cost $8 million, so it wasn't that big of a financial failure, but still, this was this guy's passion project. It was his dream. He was sure it would work, and it just turned out to be a subpar Disney movie.
Prom.
The cut is wrong, the color is wrong, the fabric is wrong.
Women.
But that does not pale in comparison to Disney's biggest flop, Mars Needs Moms. I did not even know this was a Disney movie at all. I just remember thinking it looked horrifying and bad and I didn't watch it. But nevertheless, it still came out. This motion capture Disney movie about the importance of family looks terrifying and is really scary. That's all I have to say about it. It used the same technology as a movie like The Polar Express. But what separates these two movies is the fact that The Polar Express has an incredible story and literally everything else about it is perfect. The only thing is that they look a little uncanny and creepy, but we're willing to move past that for the story. Marcis Moms is so out there in terms of story. It's just hard to latch on, especially when the visuals are this weird. But I digress. This thing had a lot of weird production stories. Seth Green was extremely passionate about this project and really wanted to be on it. He did all the motion capture acting, he did all of that. All the hard work that involved with animating the character, all of the movements. But his voice sounded too mature, so at the very last minute they redubbed all of his lines with a child actor. So Seth Green basically is the boy, but he got cut. It's really confusing. But where the film really is a flop is the money. Marcis Moms, needless to say, was a massive box office failure and has the worst financial reception for a Disney branded film. It was the 19th worst opening for a film playing in 3,000 plus theaters, and it was the 4th largest box office disappointment in history. Its budget was $150 million. It grossed $39 million. This is by far Disney's biggest financial and critical failure. Marcis Moms was completely panned, it looked weird, and it didn't make any money. Mars may need moms, but Disney did not need this movie. That was such a good way to end it. Good job, Shane.
Let her go! Let her go!
Well, there you have it, guys. Those were some of the biggest Disney flops. As always, I want to know what you guys think. Did you know about any of these flops? Did they surprise you? Did they not? Let me know in those comments down below. Let me know if you like Tales from Animation History. If you want me to keep doing this series, just let me know. Tweet us at Roundtable Vids or at RetroNemo. If you want to consider helping out the Roundtable, check us out on Patreon. There you can get exclusive access to scripts and avatars. Big shout out again to Jim Grisel. Check out all of his stuff, link in the description. He did amazing work for this. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the Roundtable. Hit that notification bell to stay in the loop with all things animation, guys. I'm RetroNemo. This was a Tale from Animation History, and I'll see you next time. Peace.